Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Coeur.
And the time has arrived that many of our viewers have been waiting for. Senator Lindsey Graham is starting his investigation this upcoming week into FISA abuse and the origins of the Trump-Russia collusion story. We are also just 6 days away from the next primary in his state. Joining me right now is South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. He is chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And Mr. Chairman, it is always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I know that the president is on his way to India this morning. You had a chance to speak with him before the president took off. Can you tell us a little about the nature of that phone call?
Yeah, he's in a very good mood. He was out west. I was with him a couple of days, and we talked about the election. I really believe he's going to get reelected based on results. It doesn't matter who runs against him as long as the economy stays strong like it is and our military stays strong. We're safe, secure, and prosperous. I very much believe it's his election to lose. And if it's Bernie, I think the House Republicans are going to be the biggest winner of a Bernie candidacy, along with Senate Republicans. I think the down ballot effect with Bernie being the nominee of the Democratic Party will be pretty severe for the Democrats.
All right, let me move on to something that I know our viewers are waiting for, and you have told me that now the time has arrived that you are going to do your deep dive into the FISA abuse and what took place over this probe into Trump and Russia collusion, which we know never materialized. I want you to listen to a soundbite of Steve Bannon, who was with us last week, and something that he was talking about with regards to you. Watch this.
We're not interested right now in hearing from the chief of staff of John Kerry. Lindsey Graham, and I have tremendous respect for him, he guaranteed at the Senate Judiciary Committee, we need to have the whistleblower. We need to have the number 2 whistleblower. We need to have Adam Schiff as a fact witness. We need Hunter and Joe Biden. I think we need Brennan. We need all of them.
So, Senator, what are your plans as you kick off this investigation this upcoming week?
Well, I don't have jurisdiction over the whistleblower. That's the Intel Committee. What I'm going to do is call the people who are involved in investigating the counterintelligence investigation. You have 21 people involved that I've named. And I want to find out, what did McCabe and Comey know? When did they know that the dossier was unreliable? The Department of Justice has withdrawn the 2 warrant requests, saying they were illegal. And in January of 2017, the primary Russian subsource told 4 members of the Department of Justice and the FBI that the dossier was a bunch of bar talk and hearsay and not reliable. I want to find out, when did Comey and McCabe understand that it was not reliable, and work from there.
So you're saying if they knew that the dossier wasn't reliable, why did they use it to take a warrant out, 4 of them, 4 times, to spy on a Trump campaign member, Carter Page?
I also want to know, in July of 2016, they tried to get a warrant and it was turned down. And it was McCabe that suggested the FBI Washington office go to New York. They got something in New York that might help you. It was the Russian dossier. So who told McCabe that the document was in New York? And if McCabe thought it would help him with the warrant, why didn't he spend some time trying to find out if it was reliable? So that's what I'm looking at. Who knew what when? Did Rosenstein know? that the dossier had been debunked by the time he signed the warrant? How could he not know?
So we're looking now on the screen of some of the players that actually signed the warrant to get the warrant in front of the FISA court. That includes Jim Comey and Andrew McCabe and Sally Yates and Rod Rosenstein and Dana Boente. Are these the people you're expecting to call down to testify in front of your committee in the next 2 weeks?
I don't know about the next 2 weeks. The first thing I want to do is call the 4 people who heard from the Russian subsource that this dossier is a bunch of bar talk and hearsay. Here's what you got to believe. That the most important investigation the FBI is conducting, the guy is now a sitting president who was the nominee of the Republican Party, that the system was told by a Russian subsource of Steele that everything in the dossier is unreliable. I find it hard to believe that that did not work its way up to Comey and McCabe. Can you imagine how the system must have took the information that the primary document, the dossier, is a bunch of garbage? To think that it did not make its way up to the top, it would be hard for me to believe. So I'm going to find out, did it make its way up to the top?
So when you say you're going to find out, how are you going to find that out? Are you going to have them come down and testify?
Yeah, I'm going to ask the 4 people in the room, when you heard from the Russian primary subsource that this is a bunch of bar talk and hearsay and it's not reliable, it was never meant to get a warrant, Steele is using in a way different than I thought he would use it. I want to find out, did any of those people tell anybody? Can you imagine working for the FBI and the Department of Justice, the most important investigation in the entire country just fell apart? And you didn't tell anybody? That's pretty hard for me to believe. And how did McCabe know the document was in New York when he couldn't get a warrant in July of 2016? How did McCabe know to go to New York? Who told him? This whole thing is fishy as hell.
Yeah.
I want to find out who knew what, when, and what they did with the information.
So just to be clear, are we going to see those testimonies in your committee within the next 2 weeks?
You're going to have people interviewed by my staff and others to get the foundation. Before I call McCabe and Comey, I want to find out exactly what happened.
Okay.
I want to find out who told what to who. Then we'll call them. I just can't believe that the investigation fell apart in January of 2017. They got 2 more warrants after they knew it was a bunch of garbage. How could that possibly happen?
Yeah, and I just want to point out our timeline, which is this counter intel activity that happened way before July 31st of 2016, which is when, of course, the FBI said that their investigation into Trump began.
Right.
We go all the way back to December of 2015 on this timeline when Michael Flynn was invited to Russia to sit next to Putin. And then you've got George Papadopoulos meeting Joseph Mifsud in April of 16. Papadopoulos also invited to Rome, where he was introduced to Mifsud as early as March of 16. This is something that we understand John Durham is looking at. All of the activity before the beginning of this investigation. Why send these informants into Trump campaign people? Do you believe that's what John Durham is looking at as well?
Yeah, I think he's looking at how it started. You got to remember, the Mueller investigation was started after Comey was fired because Rosenstein wanted Mueller to look at possible criminal activity by the Trump campaign. Here's my question to Rosenstein. If you knew then what you know now, that it was a bunch of garbage, would you have appointed Mueller? There was no crime.
Yeah.
The dossier was the basis of the warrant. In January 2017, it was a bunch of garbage. The guy who provided the information to Steele rejected the dossier as being reliable.
Yeah.
How could they continue? Why did it take 2 years for Mueller to figure this out? You should have figured it out in a week.
It is Tuesday, the 25th of February of 2020. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Indeed. Oh, and one other fair warning. Roasted corn is in my chowder, okay? It's not a chowder unless it's got the roasted corn. All right, now that we've got that cleared up, Trump is in India right now. Apparently he has failed to broker a trade deal. Oh no, whatever will we do? Well, I guess we'll have to right the ship when we get rid of the, the ballast of this guy off the rails. And we can do that probably in November. I'd like it to have been sooner, of course. But you got to work with what you got. So, no trade deal with India. I don't know. I guess we're going to have to be stuck with the best foods tikka masala. Mayonnaise. It would have been nice. Yes, I know. On the other hand, maybe we should have been sanctioning Modi for being such a, autocrat and a dictator. He feted Trump in the way that Trump wants to be feted. Apparently, there was enough of a crowd there that Trump thought he had a bigger turnout than Gandhi's funeral. Just tell him that. And I'm sure the National Archives will retouch the photos to make it true. They do that now. And, what else? Trump has insisted that every female jurist in America, I know I'm exaggerating, but just bear with me. Every female jurist in America must recuse herself when dealing with a case that has any small touch upon anything Trump. And that could be a lot of different jurisdictions and crimes that could be committed. For instance, fraud. If a woman jurist is sitting in a fraud case, apparently she has to recuse herself because, Trump's been accused of fraud. And the reason that he needs to have every female jurist recuse herself, especially on the Supreme Court, is because of fairness. Because apparently having Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Thomas, maybe even Stevens, that's not enough. If you got those women, especially the women jurists on the Supreme Court, makes it so terribly unfair. Mobsters think like that. Mostly the rest of America doesn't. We're becoming more accustomed to it now. I'm thinking about the vast middle of America who never saw a Sopranos episode. Maybe because they don't get HBO or they had something better to do than watch HBO at night. When they have to get up early in the morning to work in their fields. I think probably they were sleeping instead of watching The Sopranos. So I have a presumption that this is also very new to them. They voted for him. But it's still very new, and it must be shocking. Or maybe it's not. Maybe they think this is the way to kick the libs. And what better way to kick the libs than infect the world with coronavirus? Or if not infect it, just help out in its spread. That seems to be the plan, I think. I have no idea what this... Well, I step back. I apologize. I actually have a lot of ideas on what is the meaning behind behaviors from this administration. So cutting pandemic response funds from the CDC back in early 2017? I remember reporting on that, and we, rhetorically said, what's that about? Well, of course we know what it's about. It goes back to the old axiom here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Property is always more valuable when delivered vacant to a hostile foreign power. So if you have a pandemic, that's going to probably kill a lot of liberals. Might kill a lot of your friends too, but hey, collateral damage is collateral damage. When you are not imbued with any kind of inherent empathy for your fellow man, do you think that you're going to hold your friends in some higher esteem than the rest of all these other nothings out there? Your friends are nothing too. That's the whole idea of empathy. Well, not the whole idea, but you get my gist. If he has no empathetic feelings for just the vast mass of humanity, how is he going to have any empathy for his friends? Their friends are, I don't know, they're a means to an end until they aren't, and then they're gotten rid of. When something's used up, you throw it away. Isn't that the way of the world? Apparently it is when you're a spoiled rich boy. Ah, boy, I'll tell you. I've been fighting this kind of guy, and Donald Trump in particular, since he hit the stage. Since he became a little bit more well-known, and I'm talking, probably around the time of 1978, when he and his dad received the largest fine from a government agency for housing discrimination. He was a racist then, and he is a racist now. And on top of that, this whole idea of like trophy wives and all that, women are objects or women are possessions. God, that was just like the exact opposite of all of the sentiment that I was growing up in with my friends. People are people. We didn't understand the idea of chattel. It just seems so weird. Because it is. If you're lacking any inherent empathy in the core of your being, I suppose, well then women too are just a bunch of nothings out there. Use them until you can't use them anymore. Throw them away because that's the way of the world. Let me remind you that we only get rid of our trash to be able to prove that we've been anywhere anyway. So the more trash that you've thrown away, women in particular apparently on that level of manhood, shows what a great man you are. In the hood. And the hood in this instance seems to be a lot of private islands and penthouses. I think they're just showing off at the expense of real human beings. Why else would you have Icebox Baby Gulag franchises? I think that's going to get kicked out of the sharper image too. Trump steaks really did kill people, or almost, because, they were rancid. But the Icebox Baby Gulag sharper image product, I think that they're going to wise up at some point and probably get rid of it too, because it kills people. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe and West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Oh my God, I've gone on so long. I wanted to tell you everything that Lindsey Graham said at the top is a lie. And Maria Bartiromo, or whatever her name is, Fox Business personality, talking head, talent. But everything Lindsey said is an abject lie. Everything Maria said, really, as well, is an abject lie. Mueller did find how many instances of actual collusion? He couldn't prove it on the criminal scale. Why? Because, evidence was withheld. People lied. Obstructed. And now we have to make believe that the Mueller report is all just some sort of hoax. And it was all predicated upon the Steele dossier, which also was completely exposed as a hoax. And none of that is true. The only parts of the Steele dossier, and it wasn't a dossier, it was raw data. Okay, let's be clear. The only thing that was maybe questionable was the whole PP thing. And really what the whole PP thing is that Trump had some prostitutes pee on a bed that Michelle and Obama slept on. Not that he was getting peed on. I remember he was making it sound like, he's got some sort of... No, he's a dog. And the worst kind of dog, too, the unfriendly kind. The kind I think that should probably be kenneled outside. Maybe in an Arpaio pink underwear tent. What's on the rest of the menu as I tried to get into it? Well, of course, Trump says the stock market is starting to look very good after its biggest drop in 2 years, and it's still dropping today. Susan Collins is mad about dark money ads, but she's the reason they're legal. She's very concerned about it, though. And senior U.S. Democrats want Russia sanctions over their 2020 election interference. Well, Moscow Mitch is going to contest that now, won't he? After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Australia's top spy chief warned of unprecedented foreign espionage threats. He's got sleeper agents waking up, and they've been there for years. And a Chinese court sentenced a Hong Kong bookseller to 10 years in jail for selling books critical of the mainland leadership. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. You know, it's been some time since I've acknowledged Frances Living's music interstitials here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we want to thank her for those interstitials. She's a great act down in Los Angeles and is doing shows, so if you happen to be in the Southland area, check it out. And I do post her show dates quite frequently, so look for those on social media or wherever you might be able to find me. Speaking of which, if you would go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is our chat room link, and that is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. And to the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage, that just happens to be at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice our Patreon link, and we would be unable to be Resistance Radio without your generosity. And since we've been doing this for over 8 years, going on 9 years now, though the bulk of how we fund this operation is, comes out of our own wallets, we would still be unable to do it without you. And we need more of you. I know, it's almost like passing the collection plate, almost. But if you could afford a espresso-type coffee drink once a month sent our way, we are quantum mechanics when being able to stretch dollars beyond compare, way down on the quantum mechanic level. We have tiny little tools to do it. And thank you once again for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. You just go to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of that. And thank you, Tom. He does so much more, too, like all the graphics, voiceovers. Not all the voiceovers, but 99.99999% of the voiceover and all that stuff. So thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter @Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on social media for everybody's linkage social media pleasure. Follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. All right, let's look into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, don't forget, okay? And then we still have the chef's table coming up, so, save some room. Oliver Willis out of the American Independent brings us this first offering. After the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped over 1,000 points yesterday, Monday, Trump said the market was starting to look very good. Well, yeah, once you hit bottom, everything's going to start looking pretty good, I hope. The Dow lost 3.56% of its worth for the biggest percentage drop since February of 2018. Who was president then? Other indexes were also significantly lower, including the S&P 500 down 3.35%. Well, that's almost like a third pie. And the NASDAQ Composite, which was down 3.71%. The drop in value is attributed to the spread of the coronavirus, which CNBC said is stoking fears of a prolonged global economic slowdown from the virus spreading. Well, one good way to keep the virus from spreading is to lie about it so you think it doesn't affect the market. No wonder no bank in the world will loan money to this guy. Key overseas markets in Europe and Asia has also lost value in reaction to coronavirus fears. Now, Trump has used his Twitter account to tout America's economic strength. Over the month of February, he tweeted 27 times about the strong economy. Strong for who, I'd like to know. Less than a week ago, on the 19th of February, Trump wrote, "Highest stock market in history by far." And Trump's campaign recently tried to claim credit for economic improvements that occurred during President Barack Obama's presidency because the only thing he knows how to do is piss on everything Obama. Josh Israel of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Senator Susan Collins reportedly complained about dark money advertisements being run against her. But a decade ago, Collins was the deciding vote against a bill that would have brought transparency to political ads like the ones she now abhors. Wow. It's almost like they never can foresee the future. They can never understand how to mitigate a disaster before it occurs. According to a report in the Lewiston Sun-Journal, Collins griped that she's been assailed with dark money advertising that reaches new depths of falsehood. In her closed-door remarks to attendees at the Republican Committee's annual Lincoln Day dinner, she objected specifically to ads accusing her of cutting Medicare. But back in 2010, following the Supreme Court's controversial Citizens United ruling, remember that? That was all about fake ads run by Bossy and others, and a documentary about Hillary, causing Benghazi. It was some sort of big conspiracy. And even though it was an abject lie, the Supreme Court said, if it's to attack Hillary Clinton, we got to make it a law to do that, and they did. So Congress considered legislation to require tax-exempt organizations that run ads supporting or opposing political candidates to publicly identify contributors who funded the ads. Well, that passed the House of Representatives that May. When the Senate voted on its version of the bill 2 months later, it ran into a Republican filibuster. Collins opposed the bill, calling it another example of election year politics, and complaining that it would provide a clear and unfair advantage to unions. Yeah, the great monster out there, the Goldstein, right up there with socialism, unions. And could spend their treasury funds on ads, meaning unions could spend their money on ads without disclosing their members. Wow. That September, a pared-down version was brought up that tried to address these and other criticisms. It was also blocked by the Senate's GOP minority. How is it that they can block it as a minority, and they can block it obviously as a majority? It's almost like a coup occurred a long time ago. Since then, Republicans have successfully blocked all subsequent attempts to require disclosure for dark money advertisements because they can't win unless they cheat. That's part of their platform. It's a plank. Anonymous worker bees and Reuters bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Senior U.S. Democrats said that Trump's administration should immediately impose sanctions on Russia after U.S. intel officials told members of Congress that Russia appeared to be trying to influence this year's U.S. election. Well, in this reporter's opinion, the intel officers didn't say it appeared Russia is doing this. They said they are. And, according to the Mueller report, which is not a lie, by the way, Russia has not stopped doing it. They continue to do it now. They started before 2016. Let's remember that. I mean, really, the Soviets had a 70-year plan. Vlad's former KGB. You figure it out. Senators Chuck Schumer, Bob Menendez and Sharon Brown, I don't know what's wrong with my mouth this morning, wrote to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin, demanding that the administration immediately and forcefully put sanctions on the government in Moscow and any Russians involved in election interference. Well, a congressional source told Reuters that on Friday, Intel officials have told lawmakers that Russia appeared to be engaging in disinformation and propaganda campaigns to help both Democratic presidential challenger Bernie Sanders and Trump, who is seeking re-election in November, and the Kremlin denied interference because that's what they do. And once again, I got to tell you, the Russians are not helping Bernie. They're setting him up. They've been attacking him. Come on. And anyway, there's a means to an end here, and we all know what it is. U.S. law allows the administration to propose sanctions on Moscow in response to election interference. Congress passed the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act in 2017, partly in response to the intel community's finding that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to boost Trump's chances of winning the White House. Moscow denies the allegations, but they stood there in Helsinki, and Vlad was asked point blank, did he help? And he said, yeah. And when he was asked why, he said, because this guy's going to get rid of the Magnitsky Act and get rid of sanctions so we can continue annexing the Crimea. I mean, no one's done that since the Nazis did it to the Sudetenland. I want my place in history, too, Vlad said. Well, at least in this reporter's opinion. The White House, State Department, and Treasury did not immediately respond to a request for comment. I think they're all in India getting feted. Schumer is the Democratic leader. Menendez and Brown are the top Democrats on the Senate Foreign Relations and Banking Committees. Trump placed acting of National Intel Joseph McGuire with U.S. Ambassador to Germany Richard Grenell last week. And according to media reports, Trump was annoyed by the briefing to lawmakers about Russian interference because he doesn't want anyone to know, and everybody knows it. Well, that brings us to our break, and we better get to our break. And when we return from said break, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Middle-Aged Woe. Although Downhill is billed as a comedy drama, it's actually more a drama with some light moments. A remake of the 2014 Swedish film Force Majeure, which won the jury prize at Cannes and made several best-of lists that year, Downhill stars Will Ferrell and Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Pete and Billy Stanton, who are on vacation at an Austrian ski resort with their two tween sons. We don't learn much about the Stantons' background other than the fact that Billy is an attorney, which is revealed only a ways into the film. We do know that the purpose of the trip is for the family to spend quality time together. However, early in the trip, the family barely escapes an avalanche, leading Billy to seriously start taking stock of their marriage. In the key scene, with snow flying, Pete flees the area, being careful to secure his phone rather than moving reflexively to protect his family. WTF, just happenstairs, then cut the room. Those who have been married for a while will recognize a marriage like the Stantons. It's not bad, but it seems something's missing. Part of that something just may be an excitement for living, which is explored vicariously when Pete's younger co-worker Zach and his girlfriend Rosie appear, gushing about their wide-open travel plans. It's both touching and cringeworthy to observe this couple. Both the Stantons and the audience know this exuberance is a moment in time. Rounding out the cast is an underused Miranda Otto as the free-spirited European of indeterminate origin who is clearly in yet another kind of relationship. Farrell and Louis Dreyfus do well here, but while Downhill's setup scene after the avalanche is positively intense and the cinematography worthy of the location, the rest of the film lacks focus and falls short of the original. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American 60-Second Science. I'm Aline Augenbraun. Every thoroughbred horse alive today is descended from 3 stallions and a larger selection of mares in 17th and 18th century England. Since then, no horses outside this lineage have been permitted to enter the bloodline. That's a problem.
We analysed genetic diversity at thousands of genetic markers across the entire genome in more than 10,000 thoroughbred horses from all of the major breeding regions of the world. This is the largest set of horses that's been examined in this way to date.
Emmeline Hill, professor at University College Dublin and chief scientist with an ownership stake at an equine science company called Plus Vital.
And what we found was that there has been a highly significant increase in inbreeding in the population over the last 45 years. And probably the greatest increase in inbreeding is seen in the last 10 or 15 years.
Thoroughbred horse production is tightly controlled. Artificial insemination is not permitted, which means that breeding stallions get moved around a lot for meetups with females. These so-called shuttle stallions can mate with hundreds of mares per mating season. And there are 2 mating seasons, one in the northern hemisphere and the other in the southern.
In our study, 97% of the horses traced back to a single horse called Northern Dancer, arguably the most successful stallion of the 20th century, and his descendants have been the dominant sire lines in Australia and Europe for the last 25 years.
Northern Dancer won the Kentucky Derby in 1964. Breeding pairs are chosen for their athletic prowess and competitive behavior, leading to strong selection for genes related to muscle performance and behavior.
Traits that all have to come together in the optimal fashion to produce an elite athlete.
But without genetic diversity, you can get health and behavior issues related to inbreeding.
The thoroughbred is unusual in that most managed animal and even plant production systems have genetic monitoring in place, but the thoroughbred has no genomic selection or population management that is addressed at an industry-wide level.
The study by Hill and her colleagues is in the journal Scientific Reports. Hill's genetic testing system is available through her company.
With the DNA of a mare and the DNA of a stallion, we can make in silico predictions about the likely level of inbreeding in the hypothetical foal that might arise from that mating.
For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Aline Augenbraun.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. Occasional aches and pains are an expected part of life, but for many people, pain is a constant companion. Dr. Chad Helmick is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. He's joining us today to discuss ways to manage chronic pain. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thank you.
Chad, how many people in the U.S. suffer from chronic pain?
In 2016, 50 million adults had chronic pain, which is pain on most or every day in the past 6 months. More interesting, though, is that 20 million people have high-impact chronic pain, which is chronic pain that also limits their work or life activities on most or every day in the past 6 months. This is a problem because chronic pain is associated not only with symptoms, but with anxiety and depression, reduced quality of life, and the risk of opioid problems.
What are the most common causes of chronic pain?
The most common causes generally relate to bones and joints, like low back pain and arthritis, but there are many other causes: headaches, sickle cell disease, fibromyalgia, surgery and injuries, and many, many others.
Is chronic pain more common in any particular group of people?
Yes, it occurs at all ages, but it's more common in older middle-aged adults and in the oldest 85 and older. It's also more common in women, poor people, and those who live in rural areas.
How is chronic pain treated?
Well, the first thing to do is to get a diagnosis, which can help guide treatment. But the thinking about chronic pain now is that it becomes a chronic disease by itself, regardless of the cause, and that can cause significant problems. The real goal in management is to have a manageable level of pain, not to get rid of all pain. There's several steps that can be taken, and these are sometimes difficult to do because of barriers to access. But it makes sense to do the simplest and safest things first. And these are non-drug steps. Things like physical activity. Walking is perfectly good to help reduce pain. Also, self-management education can give you some confidence in managing chronic pain when you're on your own. There's also physical therapy, occupational therapy, psychological therapy, better sleep, which usually means less alcohol, and seeing a chiropractor or getting biofeedback and massage. If that's not enough, non-opioid drugs like Tylenol or Motrin and Advil or naproxen or Aleve can help. If those don't work, then it's time to consider something stronger. Sometimes that's opioids, but there's not great evidence that opioids are good for long-term pain in most people.
Do you have any advice for people suffering from chronic pain?
Well, it's important to work with a variety of providers who are working together to help you. The goal, again, is manageable pain so you can live a productive life. This can include physical therapy, and most people can walk, to treat any underlying depression or anxiety, and to avoid further injuries. Finally, the National Pain Strategy is laying out a strategic roadmap to improve pain management system in this country.
Where can listeners get more information about managing chronic pain?
Listeners can go to the NIH website, nih.gov, and type in National Pain Strategy.
Thanks, Chad. I've been talking today with Dr. Chad Helmick about ways to manage chronic pain. If you're experiencing daily pain, talk with your healthcare provider to ensure you have the correct diagnosis and know how to manage your condition. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. Netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Will the right to abortion survive this term of the Supreme Court? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. At issue in the case before the court is a 2014 Louisiana law that requires a doctor who performs an abortion to have admitting privileges at a nearby hospital. Exactly one doctor in all of Louisiana meets this requirement. Medically, the law is entirely unnecessary. Generally, abortion is a safe outpatient procedure. But should a woman who had an abortion ever need to be taken to a hospital, she will be admitted and treated. Whether or not the doctor who performed the procedure has admitting privileges is irrelevant. The purpose of the law has nothing to do with patient safety. Its purpose is to make abortion unavailable, to turn a woman's constitutional right to choose into a mirage. The Supreme Court in a 1992 decision called Casey, ruled that some restrictions on abortion are permissible provided they do not impose an undue burden on the constitutional right. In the case now before the court, more than 200 members of Congress have filed a brief asking the court to consider overruling Casey and Roe. Argument on the current case will be in the spring. A decision is expected by June, and the stakes for reproductive rights couldn't be higher. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That was the day a general strike by workers against the Nazis took place in Amsterdam. The Nazis had begun the occupation of the Netherlands in the spring of 1940. The German occupiers implemented a series of increasingly repressive anti-Semitic laws. In response, some young Jewish men in the city formed self-defense groups. They clashed with the occupiers and local residents who supported the Nazis' policies. To make an example against Jewish resistance, on February 22nd, the Nazis rounded up more than 400 Jewish young men in Amsterdam. They were deported to a series of concentration camps where most were killed. The Communist Party in the city issued a call for workers to stand up against this anti-Semitism. Their call was to strike, strike, strike. Working groups across the city responded. The general strike began on this day in labor history, with public tram drivers leading the strike, causing public transportation to ground to a halt. Factories and department stores all stood silent. Students walked out of classrooms. The next day, the strike spread to other nearby towns and villages. The Germans' response was quick and harsh. It crushed the strike on its third day and leveled a severe blow to Dutch anti-Nazi resistance organizing. It's estimated that between 75 and 80% of the Netherlands' Jewish population perished in the Holocaust. In 1952, a large statue called the Dock Worker was commemorated in Amsterdam in memory of the workers' strike. Each year, a ceremony is held at the statue to recall when workers stood up together against hate and to renew the promise to never forget the victims of the Holocaust. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
I'm Mark Boulanger. The Labour movement is hailing the European Union's recently announced initiative on the climate crisis as a positive step forward, but says much work is left to do. The EU has released a preliminary document entitled the European Green Deal, which will address the needs of 11 million workers who are directly affected. To find out more about the EU's Green Deal, I talked to Benjamin Denis. Mr. Denis is a policy advisor with Industrial European Union. The federation represents 7 million workers in 200 European unions. I asked Mr. Denis to describe the European Green Deal.
The European Green Deal is actually the main project of the new European Commission that started its mandate a couple of months ago in December. The Green Deal is made of a long list of initiatives that should essentially put the EU on track to be carbon neutral and circular, becoming a circular economy by 2050. To quote the words of Ursula von der Leyen, the new president of this European Commission, this is the man on the moon moment of the EU. It gives you a little bit the idea of the level of ambition which is behind the Green Deal. So at this stage, we have to on the one hand acknowledge that this is really positive to see the EU having such an ambitious project to mobilize its member states and the citizens to achieve something positive in the context of Brexit and the other crisis that the EU has gone through for the last years. This is something that we welcome. It's much more positive than the austerity agenda which has driven the previous commissions. I would like to stress another positive dimension of the Green Deal. It's obviously the willingness to put the social dimension, energy poverty, inequalities, and of course employment at the core of the project. For the first time in many years, we see a European Commission starting with social dimension being a core chapter of main project. It's not anymore as well as a chapter of, I would say, traditional neoliberal greenwashing exercise. Now, the truth of the pudding is in the eating, and we know that we have to be extremely careful, extremely demanding in the next month, because we mainly have words, but what we need, of course, is to see action and tangible resources. Now, we have to say, on the other hand, that at this stage there are a lot of uncertainties which remain for different reasons, but mainly because at this stage the Green Deal is 24 pages document made of something like 20, 30 possible initiatives. We have an indicative timeline, but for the rest there are a lot of question marks floating around.
Within the European Green Deal, which you have just described, there is the Just Transition Mechanism. What is the Just Transition Mechanism, and why is it needed?
The Just Transition Mechanism, which has been proposed by the Commission, is basically a mechanism to support people and regions that might be impacted by decarbonization. Without entering into too many details, it's a mechanism that will use the EU budget as well as other financial instruments of the European Union to support regions that are highly dependent on fossil fuel and fossil fuel-related activities such as coal mining, coal-based power production, and so on and so forth, helping them to diversify their economy and to create new activities. In other words, to deal with the social and economic challenges that might be triggered by decarbonization.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. You can find our features and daily newscasts on our website at www.radiolabor.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Labor. I'm Marc Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 28 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high, maybe in the mid-60s. Overnight lows will remain in the mid to low 30s. Seems like daytime highs today and tomorrow will be in the mid-60s. Sunny skies should prevail, though we will have a mix of clouds and sun today early. Winds are light and variable, will remain so for the next couple of days. Pollen is rated at none. Air quality index locally is good at 21 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at 3. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.51 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 78%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 46 and partly cloudy. Paris is 48 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 61 and sunny. Kyiv is 41 and cloudy. Kabul is 50 degrees and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 66 and fair. Tokyo is 48 with a rain shower. Sydney, Australia is 75 degrees and fair. San Francisco, California is 54 degrees and sunny. And New York is 51 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Colin Packham of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Australia is under an unprecedented threat of foreign espionage and interference, one of the country's most senior spy chiefs said in a rare speech, citing the case of a sleeper agent who spent years building business links. Well, I don't think it was just biz links. Australian Security Intelligence Organization, otherwise known as the ASIO, maybe it's ASIO for short, Director General Mike Burgess said several nations were working hard to influence lawmakers, government officials, media figures, business leaders, and academics. The level of threat we face from foreign espionage and interference activities is currently unprecedented. It is higher now than it was at the height of the Cold War, Burgess said, at ASIO headquarters in Canberra, as he unveiled the agency's annual threat assessment. Burgess did not identify the countries infiltrating Australia, a staunch ally of the United States. I bet we're doing it because we're staunch allies, you know. Though analysts said it was a thinly veiled outing of China, you would think. Reuters reported in September that Australia's intelligence agencies concluded China was responsible for a cyber attack on the Australian Parliament and the three largest political parties just months before a general election in May of 2019. China, which is Australia's largest trading partner, has denied responsibility for the attack. Australia decided not to reveal the identity of the attackers in order to protect its trading relationship with China. Oh, money always matters then, doesn't it? Burgess said Australia was being targeted in part because of its strategic position and alliances and its leadership in science and technology. He said a sleeper agent from an unnamed country, China, lay dormant for several years, building business and community links before he started to supply information about expatriate dissidents. That information was then used to harass the dissidents in Australia and their relatives overseas.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.